Hello, and welcome to the show. This is Emotional Badass, where Moxie meets mindful. I'm your host, Nikki Eisenhower, life coach and psychotherapist. And on today's episode, we are exploring part 2 of 9 irrational beliefs about trauma therapy and therapists. Welcome to this episode. It is a part 2. So I hope you have listened to part 1 before getting into this one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening and tuning in. Thank you for listening to our commercials. Thank you for supporting our sponsors. And thank you for being someone who self-develops in this world. Light and love, and on to the show. Number 5. This is my 5th irrational belief about trauma therapy or therapists. Because your therapist is a therapist, they know how to not have any problems. This is a big, giant, fat nope. Therapists are human. I promise you, you want them to be. Anyone who thinks this of therapists, that therapists don't have problems or they've learned enough to not have any problems, probably has a whole lot of issue with their own perfectionism, is likely very critical of the self. They're likely suffering from low self-esteem, which often puts other people on a pedestal, particularly a therapist. If you wind up with an unhealthy narcissistic therapist, that is a very unfortunate dynamic. Likely, this is indicative of someone who puts people on pedestals in their life. If you are a humble therapist and you feel someone putting you on the pedestal, you will likely help that person normalize that you do not need to be up on that pedestal. This is why, for a very long time with clients, I have used language like, we are co-collaborators in this process. I am the expert in the human condition. You are the expert in you in your life, and we come together and we collaborate. Because I won't participate in allowing my clients from their own low self-esteem place to put me on a pedestal. And if you are out there listening to this show thinking that I'm perfect, or I never raise my voice, or I never lose it, that is wrong. I am just as human as you are. I'm emotional and I'm intense and I feel a lot and I think a lot. And I still have waves of problems that life throws my way, just like all of us do. It is irrational to think that a therapist or anybody else in your life, social media is a great example in our modern culture, that they have some kind of perfect life going on. Don't hurt yourself that way. Don't create more of a divide inside of your psyche that other people are up on this pedestal and you're just way down here with all your problems. That's just not true. If we are alive, we have struggle. And again, that's another irrational belief for a different day, that I could ever do enough work to not have some human struggle. I hope you can hear as I go through this episode how easy it is for us to pick up irrational beliefs that don't really help us, and sometimes, unfortunately, maybe help keep us down. We get to shed those irrational beliefs. We get to reframe irrational belief into rational belief to help us be more real about ourselves, about other people, and about what's really going on in life, what's possible, what's probable when we work on it. Here's a little story for you in this regard. A good friend of mine told me once that he had been working with a therapist, and it just was kind of blah. Right? He didn't know if he was getting anything out of it, and she didn't have any red flags, but he just maybe wasn't feeling it, right? So thinking about packing it all in and ending it, when he showed up for what he thought would be his last appointment, and the therapist was flustered, crying quietly as he arrived, and she looked up at him and said through tears, "I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm going to be able to serve you today and sit with you." And she hesitated, and he sat down and said, "What happened?" And he could tell that she felt uncomfortable. When we're good therapists, we are taught that that space is for you. And it is wrong for us to use any of those moments to process anything about ourselves. And I agree with that. It just needs to be nuanced. That's why therapy to me is art form. Here is the art. He could see her considering not telling him. And then she made the decision to tell him the truth. And it was in that moment of truth-telling that the therapist allowed what I called her honest humanity to show instead of the white coat-like professionalism that is touted as the end-all be-all. She told him, "My dog just died. My friend's a big animal lover." He worked with her for years after that, very effectively. That was a turning point for him. He told me that after that moment, he could trust her, and he hadn't trusted her before that moment. That by showing him her real emotion, her humanity, he could then better show her his. This is a note here on the irrational belief I talked about earlier. What you're paying for? You're paying to form a relationship, to spend time with this person. And it develops over time. The relationship develops. And it's through that relationship when some life can unfold. This is not just something that happens in therapy. This is how all human relating works. Developing relationship over time. And if we are showing up to therapy because we had very dysfunctional childhoods, we had a lot of betrayal from other human beings, we are right to not trust a therapist who can't show us any humanity or any emotion. We are not just supposed to walk up to a human being and go, "Oh my goodness, did big academia give you some letters behind your name? Ooh, then I am to trust you." It's the same way in the Catholic Church. People walk up to a priest and go, "My goodness, you have that priest collar? Then I shall trust you with my most precious children," right? We can't just trust people because they smack on a collar or put some letters behind their name because some big fancy institution said so. It's unnatural. It's not how humans were meant to relate to each other. It's a problem I have with my own profession. It may be fine to not go into these emotional realms. If you had a car accident and now you have a phobia about getting into a car, all right, go work with the techniquey person. But if you are dealing with human betrayal, and that's what you're trying to heal, you are right to not trust a therapist who won't get human with you. The problem here that my profession has tried to account for with all their super strong boundaries and white-coated, only do evidence-based practice is that low insight or narcissistic therapists can hear me say this and try to force fake human moments to try to appear trustworthy. That's not real intimacy. And that won't build trust. Might manipulate a very broken client, but it's not going to work to help that client heal. Clients who show up wounded with trauma often have very low to no self-worth and very low to no ego strength. They may have a very hard time walking away from a manipulative therapist. These moments of humanity, as I'm naming them, they must be honest. They must be organic to be real and to be positively impactful. This is the way that I cultivate a love for my clients. And it is a love. And they feel that love. They acknowledge that love. And I acknowledge it too. But there's no world where I hang a shingle or put an offering on my website that says, "Come on in, come pay me for a session and I will love you." But through the process, the love is a natural byproduct because we're human and we're sharing space that is very intimate, very healing, and very real. Irrational belief number 6. All therapists have high insight and high emotional intelligence. Y'all, you have no idea how much my heart hurts with this one. More than anything, I want this irrational belief to be true. I wish I had the power to make this true. I, of course, believe that all therapists should have insight and emotional intelligence. Of course, it's reasonable for the public, even other therapists, to go into counseling thinking that colleges wouldn't let people get master's degrees in therapy and states wouldn't let therapists hold licenses as therapists or counselors unless they possess high emotional intelligence and insight. What a reasonable thing to believe. But colleges don't do this, y'all. They don't do this in any field. There's absolutely no vetting for morality in any healthcare field. There's no vetting for ethical leaning. There's no vetting for levels of manipulation or maturity, insight, awareness. There's no assessment for low or high emotional intelligence. There's no measuring or accounting for kindness, compassion, warmth, personal responsibility, integrity, ability to follow through. None of these things that I might put in the category of character. A hard truth about therapy and every other field out there, y'all, is that if you can get a good grade on a test from memorizing, you can become anything in academia you're willing to pay for and get a degree in. 30 plus years ago, the standard to become a therapist through college was that all therapy students had to be in therapy. It was required. I think that's right. I'm all for this as a rule. However, our good old American court system got involved because some people sued over this therapy requirement. The stories that float through my field about this down from old school professors were that there were lawsuits. And what was ruled was that college programs can't force students into therapy. So they stopped requiring it because they couldn't require it. So at best, some programs will strongly recommend. I went through school with lots of people who weren't in therapy, had never been in therapy, and to this day won't go. Our court system is not one of figuring out what's right. Unfortunately, our court system is largely about figuring out what the legal loopholes are so that we can get out of doing what we don't want to do. Stay more comfortable. I wish our court system was based on what is reasonable and sensible, healthy, even smart. But it's not. So we do well to know this and deal with the realities instead of pretending the ideals are available. Remember that my course, 30 Days to Peace, kicks off on the 1st of the month. Come get it while you still can. We're changing it up a little bit, y'all. Changes are coming soon. I designed this program to help you turn stress into calm with easy daily practices that take just 7 to 15 minutes a day. In 30 days, you'll cultivate lasting inner peace and learn techniques that you can use for the rest of your life. Sign up now at emotionalbadass.com/peace. Use code BADASS. Listeners of the show can receive 30% off, which leads me to my 7th irrational belief when it comes to trauma therapists and therapy. I believe lots of the public, lots of clients believes that all therapists go to therapy. And as I've mentioned, talking about the colleges, used to be a requirement through college, isn't anymore. And no, believe it or not all therapists go to therapy. And if I told you I was going to a dentist that didn't ever go to a dentist, that would be alarming, right? Yet this is fairly normal in the mental health field. And I'm talking about counselors and therapists, master's level. I'd be willing to bet good money there are more psychiatrists and medical professionals who also don't either see their own psychiatrists or their own therapists. Y'all, I have lost friends over this one. Because the friends that I've had in this profession that didn't go to therapy, I'm a strong mirror. The friends and close colleagues that I've led into my inner circle that I hold very dear are the ones that very much value being on the other side of that chair too, as if it's fair game. You'd be surprised how many therapists I've heard say something like, "What's the point of me going to therapy? I already know what they're going to say." To which I have answered, oh, the point is very much to be vulnerable, to sit your booty on that other side of the chair, to stay intimately connected to the vulnerability of how that feels to open yourself up to another person, to remember what's at risk, to have your own ideas, your own perspectives challenged, questioned, given different therapeutic insights. In my opinion, a therapist should be in therapy. Just like a regular non-therapist person should work out their body and have a lot of movement, go on walks, limit caffeine. For a therapist, I don't want therapy to just be like a physical therapy after an injury, after something goes wrong. I want it to be a continuous strength training, a support. This is also how good therapists don't burn out. When we go to therapy, that therapist is also bound by confidentiality. That is the only place, other than a group of therapists that are working together to support each other. We call that supervision in my field. But therapy is the only place where we can go and process our countertransference, figure out what to do with it, get a perspective from another professional, one that is tasked with helping hold our hand through our growth. In my book, you have every right to ask a therapist if they go to their own therapist. And if they bristle at that comment or don't want to answer you, go elsewhere. Number 8 is that the best therapy is evidence-based. Now, lots of people will have a very heady academic argument about why evidence-based is always the best. It's been studied after all. The cult of science grows every day. We worship what science tells us over our own critical thinking, over our own human-to-human handed down wisdom. And I believe we are starting to see the consequences of the cult of science. Scientific method is beautiful. It is healthy. But we just cannot apply that scientific method to the complexity and the artistry of the human condition in the way that we want proof of everything studied. I am a believer. You don't need to be a believer, but I am a believer that most science is bought and captured. It's part of why I don't reference more studies, because I would need to have 1,000 people in the Patreon to have a full-time person to try to get to the bottom, the starting point of who funded any study that I'd be willing to talk about. There was a huge push through the 90s and through the early 2000s that counseling was to be evidence-based. They chanted it to us in school because psychology and counseling are in truth very soft sciences. The foundation of psychology is on theory, idea. Evidence-based makes them harder, and they pushed evidence-based as they wanted insurance companies to be forced into paying for treatment. Many therapy practitioners have been taught to throw almost all of their humanity out of the therapy office window to just practice in these evidence-based ways. These are also the ways that CYA, that is a term that healthcare professionals know intimately. It stands for cover your ass. If you get pulled into court, what holds up is this is an evidence-based practice. This was not my opinion. It's kind of sad. As if the therapist, their humanity, is disallowed to bring anything to the work. There may be a time and a place for only evidence-based therapy or theory so proven by science. But when I have been in the care of these types of practitioners as the client, as a highly sensitive person, I have felt unseen, misunderstood, as if I'm there to supposedly fit into their evidence-based techniques more so than they're supposed to meet me where I am. This added to me feeling broken and confused and wrong and weird and alien, first in my family, then in the bigger world, and then across the chairs from an evidence-based therapist. I'm not basic. I suspect you listening, you are not basic either. I'm complex. I'm layered. The idea that someone would deal with me therapeutically only through what has been scientifically studied and proven makes me feel like a science experiment. Makes me feel like I'm dealing with a science robot assessing me and sitting with me instead of a human being. Everything that I have needed therapy for in my life, and I do mean everything, is because of loss and human betrayal. I've been helped most by those who met me with their humanity, their techniques and evidence-based theories, a backdrop, there if we want or need them, but not meeting me in the forefront of evidence-based information. I also think this is a clever way for therapists to protect their own vulnerability and not have a whole lot of vulnerable emotional skin in the game. And I do believe in trauma work that that's an imbalance, a great imbalance that the client feels and does not benefit from. I believe therapy, especially for a highly sensitive person, must be art form over evidence-based, must be about exploring the interplay of humanity between therapist and client then client and everybody else in the world within the safety of the boundaried sessions. Then the art of being a human can be taken by that highly sensitive person, by that recovering trauma survivor, out of the office and into the world. In my opinion, highly skilled and effective therapists know that they must practice artfully, that real life offers no script or study or evidence of how to handle it. Like the time someone farted really loudly in an addiction group I had, and we all giggled, trying not to giggle till we almost couldn't breathe and were falling out of our chairs. And that actually was the most therapeutic thing that could have happened to that group. That group needed to bond. And from that moment of laughter, a moment that anybody witnessing would go, this wasn't a therapeutic moment. This was wasting their time. An evidence-based person would see that as a waste. There's no evidence that proves that that's worthwhile, yet that laughter, that bonding, was what set that group of people up to fuel some much deeper work later on. You think there's evidence-based encouragement out there telling me how to handle somebody farting in my group? No way. It's art form. How about the times I had drunk parents show up supporting their kids, coming to addiction family group? One of those people who would show up drunk to my group was a judge. I look young now in my 40s. Imagine me in my 20s telling a judge that had had a 3 or 4 Scotch lunch with other judges and lawyers that he was not allowed to come to my addiction facility and group with liquor on his breath. How do you think he liked receiving that from me? There is so much in working with human beings that must be art form and must be learned over time from very uncomfortable moments. It is from our deep discomfort that we learn, that we grow, that we evolve, and that we cultivate art form. Show me the study that proves that. The 9th irrational belief I have for you when it comes to trauma therapy and therapists is this: because you pay them, any love or affection, any attachment or care is not real. It's fake. I struggled with this for a very long time. Anyone I have effectively therapeutically worked with where I was the counselor, honestly, I have loved. If I couldn't find something to love about them, I wouldn't work with them very long. And oh boy, does that make my profession uncomfortable. My clients know, because we talk about it, that I care. Now they know it because they come to me from the show. They can feel my care before I ever meet them. We talk about the reasonable boundaries of this kind of love. They come to understand that I love them. I won't save them. I won't give them time outside of sessions because I have boundaries with my energy, my bandwidth, my time and space. It's how I take care of myself. Loving them doesn't mean they have more access to me. They get more time or energy. Those are the boundaries of our relationship. We work with the deep truth of human emotion together. Sometimes an inner child gets jealous knowing that I love many inner children. I encourage my clients to be this honest with me. And they risk, and I have so much respect for that risk when they show up and tell me, wow, I showed up at one of your live streams and I could tell you knew other people there and my inner child didn't like it. Those are some of the most powerful moments I could have, helping someone heal their inner child. Because I get to say, yes, it's an okay human feeling. It's also a right, healthy human feeling that as we grow up, we realize that even our parents, they're not just our parents. They're their own people in their own right. They have relationships that have nothing to do with their children, hopefully, if they're healthy. This is how we grow and evolve from very dysfunctional childhoods. This is the intimacy of really effective trauma work. This is part of how trauma survivors start to learn how to have reasonable expectations of others, not expecting little to nothing from people and not expecting way too much. It's uncomfortable. It can be a little sticky, and it can be profoundly effective. I help people release unhelpful jealousy. Through the intimacy of this work, I get to help normalize how healthy adults move through the world, something we very much need when we come from dysfunctional families. This is part of what gives someone confidence to negotiate their boundaries and their needs with other people in the world. Lisa very much helped me with this in my life. And I could feel her beginning to love me. I could feel it. And I could feel me loving her. I thought that was wrong from the teachings of my profession. Thank goodness, like me, Lisa is a logotherapist. That's the term from Man's Search for Meaning. If you read Man's Search for Meaning, one of my all-time favorite books, I think the most powerful book you could read by Viktor Frankl, he talks about his experience of actually being an optimist. He talks about what was beautiful, the moments of sharing a morsel of bread while he was detained in a concentration camp during World War II. And in the end of that book, he urges therapists to not be sheep, to basically break some of those sheepish rules, to meet people where they are, to really embrace our humanity. You can hear it's choking me up as I think about it, because through that book and the courage of my healer being able to look at me one day and say, Nikki, I love you. I've taken that human legacy of love, of courage, and been able to pass it on. My clients know that I am maternal, but I'm not their mom. They get to understand that they have a love for me that may be different than the love that they show in their lives. In the nuance of working through all of that, we learn how to give ourselves permission to love as we feel, to embrace our real highly sensitive humanity. We're 15 to 20% of the population. It means in all realms, my training as a counselor, everywhere I walk in the world, 80 to 85% of the people are not wired like me. It means I've gotten advice from people who don't think like me, who don't feel like me. And at the end of the day, don't really understand how I think, how I feel, how I move through the world, and ultimately what I need, what resonates with me, what feels true and real and healing. My clients know that my love is very separate from control and that I care for them even when they make decisions that I wish they would make for themselves. It's a very important thing for me as a therapist, as a healer, because trauma survivors are people pleasers. Sensitive people are people pleasers. I don't believe I'm doing my clients a service if I don't give them my opinions and encourage them to hold on to their own and go against mine, because that is what they will face again and again and again and again outside in the bigger world. If you are a therapist out there and you are interested in learning how to work with people the way that I do, make sure that you're on my mailing list. We have a lot of exciting things coming this year, a lot of new offerings, a lot of different things that we're doing. We're going to change how we're offering the Peace Course. If Emotional Badass and what I talk about, what I share resonates with you, and you're not a therapist, again, make sure you're on my mailing list. It has taken me 44 years to make peace with who I am, how I am. In some ways, life will challenge me all the days of my life. Challenge that peace. I want my peace muscles strong. Means I need my self-confidence strong. My ability to embrace who I am instead of who the world would like me to be for the world's comfort. We face that as people. We face that as highly sensitive therapists. What a spiritual connection to seek help, to seek understanding, and to find each other when we seek each other out in the world. If you are alone, if you have felt alien, like I acknowledged spending a lot of time feeling in this episode in my life, I want you to remember and allow yourself to connect to that this show is downloaded all over the world. There are people out there just like you who are interested in depth, real healing, real peace, the art form of human connection, and how to move through this life with more joy, more serenity, more laughter, more lightness, more connection, more of what's real while we let go of the rest. Thank you so much for being on this journey with me. Thank you for being a listener. Thank you for being someone in the world who's trying to better themselves, who is lowering stress and rising joy. Let's all rise. If you want to take the peace course before we change how we're doing it, you got this month. We may or may not be doing it in December, so come join in November. These are muscles. We get to have strong muscles when it comes to holding on to our peace, practicing our peace. If you are a trauma survivor, you deserve peace. And I know that you know that in your thoughts, in your mind, in your head. And I know that you want your body to feel the peace that you know you deserve, you know you're worthy of. There is this space in our recovery where our mind knows and our body doesn't know yet. This is where we can practice. This is where we can do some emotional muscle strength training. And what that does for us as we move through life, and life throws us some wave of crazy out of left field stress, we have a muscle memory when it comes to peace. And then we can find peace. We can cultivate it. We can release our emotion in ways that bring us closer to peace faster, with more ease, with less struggle, and frankly, more respect for this one precious life and the human that you are. You deserve more peace with more ease, don't you? I can't just want that for you. You have to want it for yourself and know that it takes practice, and you are worth that practice. So if you want to come do that work with me, come join Emotional Strength Training 30 Days to Peace in November. It starts on the 1st, and I can't wait to see you there. Sign up now at emotionalbadass.com/peace. Use code BADASS. Listeners of the show can receive 30% off. I have more Patreon shout-outs. Not only do you get exclusive content, commercial-free episodes, the biggest discounts to every single thing that we put out there into the world, you also get a shout-out. So I want to give a shout-out of thanks, of gratitude, send a little hug out over these internet radio waves to Michelle, Mary Jo, Crystal, Just Jackie. I want to thank Heather, Hannah, Nina, Melissa, and Sean. Head on over to patreon.com/emotionalbadass to support the show and grow with our community. Light and love, y'all. Thank you so much. I am an emotional badass. You are an emotional badass. And together, we are where Moxie meets mindful. Light and love. And I will see you right here next time for a brand new episode.